Top 10 bulletproof engines from the 60s, built to outlive you. Have you ever wondered why your grandpa's old Chevy still fires up with just a twist of the key, while your neighbor's modern SUV needs a laptop to get through an oil change? Back in the 1960s, engines weren't just built to perform, they were built to last. This was a time when engineers used more metal than needed built blocks, thick enough to stop small arms fire, and somehow made engines that could survive blown gaskets, bad fuel, and teenagers with a heavy right foot. Today we're counting down the top 10 most bulletproof engines of the 1960s motors, so tough, so overbuilt, they just refused to die. From unsung inline sixes to legendary small blocks, these aren't just power plants, they're war stories on wheels. And this list isn't just our opinion. Over 335 fans voted, and today we're letting the engines speak for themselves. So hit that like button, subscribe if you love classic power, and tell us in the comments which one you think will still be running long after we're gone. Chevy 283 Small Block V8. According to our poll, 44% of you voted the Chevy 283 as the most bulletproof engine of the 1960s. And honestly, we couldn't agree more. Born in 1957, the 283 wasn't made for trophies. It was made to haul your family to Colorado and back without ever breaking a sweat. It didn't have wings, but it ran like a mechanical guardian angel. With 283 cubic inches, this was the kind of motor you'd find under everything from your grandpa's Bel Air to that early Corvette you once dreamed of. With compression ratios between 8.5 to 1 and 10.5 to 1, its rumble alone could turn heads from blocks away. The OHV cam in block layout, 4.00-inch bore, and 3.00-inch stroke made it a masterclass in balance and reliability. Whether using a 2- or 4-barrel Rochester or Carter carburetor, backed by a Delco ignition, this engine started every time like clockwork. It was cast with high nickel blocks, forged cranks, and tolerances so tight they'd make a Swiss watchmaker blush. The bottom end was overbuilt like a Soviet tank. Mechanics swore by it, change the oil, and it'll outlive you. 500,000 miles easily. No turbos, no electronics, just fuel, spark, and heart. Travel to any developing country, and you'll still see old Chevys running with original 283s under the hood, often hauling cargo lumber or 5 passengers and a goat. In places like rural Mexico, Cuba, or Brazil, these engines are treated like family heirlooms, ugly, unkillable, and worth their weight in gold. This was the engine your granddad swore he'd pass down. And guess what? He was right. The Chevy 283 doesn't quit. It just keeps running. Dodge 318L AV8. If you grew up around old Mopars, chances are you knew the 318 before you could spell reliability. It was the V8 that didn't need fanfare or decals. Just a key, some gas, and the promise that it would always get you home, even if home was 3 states away. And underneath all that loyalty, a rock-solid 318 cubic inch heart, 5.2 liters of cast-iron dependability. Chrysler gave it a 3.91-inch bore, a 3.31-inch stroke, and a 9.0 to 1 compression ratio that sipped pump gas like a gentleman. Whether you had the 2-barrel for cruising or the 4-barrel for towing, the output sat between 230 and 250 horses. But truth be told, it always felt like more. Some engines die young. The 318 refused. Honestly, sometimes it felt like it wasn't assembled in Detroit, but forged deep inside a Cold War nuclear facility by guys in lead suits and welders' goggles. It didn't need to prove itself. Over decades, the 318 just kept showing up under hoods of Dart's Newports and Dodge pickups from coast to coast. The secret wasn't speed, it was stamina. Mechanics would joke, you can run it hot, run it dry, and it'll still start Monday morning. And 25% of voters in our survey agree this thing just won't die. Did you ever have the chance to drive a 318? Or maybe you're still running one today? Tell us your story in the comments below. Ford 302 Windsor V8. Some engines feel like they were built by engineers. The 302 Windsor, that one feels like it was built by someone's dad. You know, the type flannel shirt, coffee in hand, and the ability to fix anything with duct tape and determination. Introduced in 1968, the Ford 302 cubic inch V8, or 4.9 liters, if you're fancy, became the beating heart of countless blue oval legends. With a 4.00-inch bore and 3.00-inch stroke compression ratios between 9.0 to 1 and 10.5 to 1, and up to 290 horsepower in performance trims, it delivered real-world power without drama. The cast iron block and head's hydraulic lifters and pushrod OHV design meant you didn't need a computer science degree to fix it. Just a toolbox, a buddy named Chuck, and maybe a weekend. It powered everything from Mustangs to Broncos, quietly earning its reputation not by winning races, though it did that too, but by never letting you down when it mattered. Truth is, this engine didn't break down. It just got bored waiting for you to check the oil. Some even joked it wasn't cast in Windsor, Ontario, but dropped from orbit by NASA as an indestructible test object. With 23% of your votes, the Windsor lands firmly among the top-tier bulletproof legends of the 60s. And it deserves every bit of that praise. Pontiac 350 V8. Nobody brags about the Pontiac 350. It wasn't the hero of the drag strip. It didn't come wrapped in stripes, chrome scoops, or magazine covers. But while the louder engines were busy revving for attention, the 350 just kept doing its job without breaking a sweat or asking for applause. So what do you get when you stuff 350 cubic inches, that's 5.7 liters of working-class determination, into a Pontiac and forget to make a big deal out of it? You get a sleeper with bite. With a 3.88-inch bore and 3.75-inch stroke and compression ratios from 9.2 to 1 to 10.5 to 1, it made anywhere from 265 to 325 horsepower. Not headline-making, but definitely enough to haul a loaded Lehman's, outrun your buddy's small block Chevy, and still have enough grunt to pass gas stations like they were optional. What folks didn't realize, this modest 350 came from the same bloodline as the Pontiac 389 and 400 engines that built reputations on drag strips and back roads alike. It inherited the thick castings, heavy-duty internals, and that big block growl waiting just under the pedal. Sure, only 8% of you picked it in our poll, but the real ones, no. This wasn't the prom king. It was the guy who stayed late, fixed the generator, and drove home in the same car 40 years later. Chevy 292 Inline 6. On paper it looked like just another truck engine, but anyone who's ever messed with the Chevy 292 knows this thing was a secret weapon tucked away under hoods where GM hoped nobody would notice. Launched in 1963, the 292 cubic inch inline 6 4.8 liters officially made 165 horsepower and a meaty 260 pound-feet of torque. But officially is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. In reality, this engine was underrated like, oops, we accidentally built something better than our V8's underrated. It had 7 beefy main bearings, a forged steel crankshaft and block walls, so thick you'd think it was cast for artillery, not pickups. Most were buried in C-10 trucks and heavy-duty workhorses. But racers, hot rodders, and engine builders they saw through the disguise. The 292 didn't just run, it growled, twisted, and pulled like it had something to prove. With the right cam and carb setup, it could outrun small blocks and make V8 guys nervous. And the wild part, GM knew it. That's why they quietly choked it with restrictive intakes and low RPM tuning. Only the real gearheads ever unlocked its full potential. And they'll tell you with a grin, the 292 wasn't just tough, it was suppressed. You didn't just drive one, you discovered it. Ford 289 V8. Before the big blocks came in, swinging Ford had the 289, and it punched way above its weight. It didn't just power early Mustangs, it defined them. With 289 cubic inches under the hood, that's 4.7 liters, this small block V8 made up to 271 horsepower in its high-performance K-Code version. It had a 4.00-inch bore and 2.87-inch stroke-running compression ratios around 10.0 to 1. Paired with a 4-barrel carb and solid lifter cam, it revved clean and pulled hard. It lived under Falcon's Fairlanes and GT 350s. And let's not forget, Carroll Shelby took one look at this engine and said, "Yeah, that'll do." What followed was a street and track legend. But it wasn't just about speed. The 289 was simple, rugged, and shockingly reliable. Mechanics called it the wrench-friendly V8, easy to tune, easy to rebuild, and forgiving as hell. There are still guys running original 289s today, untouched since the Johnson administration. One Mustang owner told us he's logged over 250,000 miles, multiple road trips, some spirited weekends at the Strip, and the engine's still purring like it wants more. It never asked for attention. It just ran and ran and ran. Did you ever own a 289 or ride shotgun in one? Share your memories in the comments. Mopar 225 Slant-6. If engines had a Hall of Fame for surviving pure abuse, the Mopar 225 Slant-6 would already have a golden bust, probably still running. Somewhere around 1960, Chrysler quietly dropped 225 cubic inches of indestructible iron into the world. 3.7 liters, 145 horsepower, and a slanted little chip on its shoulder. But the numbers never told the real story. This wasn't about performance, it was about immortality. Tilted 30 degrees to the side, the engine fit under low-slung hoods while maintaining full intake length for low-end torque. That slant wasn't just clever, it gave the engine perfect internal balance, allowing it to hum like a sewing machine even after decades of neglect. It came with a forged steel crankshaft, big beefy main bearings, and thick castings designed to shrug off abuse. Overheating? No problem. Blown head gasket? Keep driving. No oil? It might just laugh at you. From Dodge Darts to pickup trucks to ice cream vans and airport luggage carts, the Slant-6 powered America's back roads and back alleys. Mechanics would joke you could drain the fluids, throw a wrench into the bay, and it would still find compression. Only 6 cylinders. Slanted. Unstoppable. And still idling somewhere right now in a dusty barn waiting to be woken up. AMC 401 V8. Some engines roar into history books. Others quietly leave burn marks on the pavement, and the AMC 401 was firmly in the second group. You didn't see it in flashy commercials or Sunday night primetime, but ask any gearhead who's driven one, and they'll tell you this thing pulled like a freight train with a grudge. While it officially launched in 1971, The 401 was born from the late 60s AMC 390 architecture. And boy, did it evolve. With 401 cubic inches, that's 6.6 liters of righteous rage, this V8 punched out 330 horsepower and nearly 430 pound-feet of torque in its prime. It had a 4.165-inch bore and a 3.68-inch stroke, with compression ratios hovering around 9.5 to 1. But numbers only tell half the story. This was the engine AMC stuffed into police interceptors, AMX's Javelins, and even early Jeep Wagoneers, like it was daring you to underestimate them. It came with forged internals, thick wall castings, and oiling systems that could take serious punishment. Most folks didn't know what they had, but those who did, they held on tight. Even today, there are 401s still starting every morning on farms in the Midwest, still rumbling through quiet neighborhoods, in forgotten Jeeps, still outrunning time. The 401 wasn't AMC's loudest voice, but it was its strongest punch. And it never asked for thanks. It just kept running. Chevy 327 V8. Ask any old-school gearhead to name the most perfectly balanced small block of the 60s, and chances are they'll say 327, no question. The 327 cubic inch V8 introduced in 1962 sat right in the sweet spot. Not too big, not too mild, just enough displacement to roar when asked, but smooth enough to take your grandma to church on Sunday. It made between 210 and 375 horsepower, depending on the setup, thanks to a 4.00-inch bore and 3.25-inch stroke that delivered crisp throttle response and revs that felt endless. It powered icons like the Corvette Stingray, the Nova SS, and the Impala, not just moving them, but defining them. Builders loved it because it was easy to tune. Drag racers trusted it because it stayed together when pushed to the edge. And street guys, they knew that no matter how cold the morning or how long the trip, the 327 would light up on the first turn of the key. What really made it bulletproof wasn't just the specs. It was how everything worked in harmony. No weak link, no drama, just raw, reliable power. They just didn't make them like this after 1970, said one viewer. And he's right. The 327 wasn't just an engine. It was a moment in time, and we're still chasing it. Buick 300 V8. The Buick 300 was never meant to be a hero, and maybe that's why it lasted so long. Quiet, smooth, and tucked under the hoods of Skylarks and Specials, starting in 1964, it didn't brag. It just worked. Rated between 210 and 250 horsepower, the 300 cubic inch V8, 4.9 liters, featured a 3.75-inch bore and 3.40-inch stroke. But here's where it gets interesting. Early versions came with aluminum cylinder heads and intake manifolds, decades ahead of the weight-saving curve. Pair that with cast-iron sleeves and a forged steel crankshaft, and you've got a motor that could survive years of abuse and still purr like a content house cat. While others threw rods overheated or rattled themselves apart, the 300 just kept spinning. There are stories of these engines clocking over 300,000 miles in old Buicks used daily, never rebuilt, never babied. One viewer told us about a 1965 Buick wagon still running its original 300 V8 on the farm hauling firewood every winter, starting in below freezing temps without a fuss. Another claimed his aluminum head version outlived 2 transmissions and 3 owners. It never made headlines, but it never died either. And for a motor that flew under the radar, that's the highest praise of all. The Buick 300 didn't need to shout. It just refused to quit. weren't built to impress. They were built to last. And somehow, all these years later, they're still out there, ticking, idling, waiting. Maybe under the hood of a rusty pickup behind someone's barn, maybe under a tarp in your uncle's garage. We're not just talking about engines. We're talking about mechanical hearts that refused to quit. They crossed states, hauled families, pulled trailers, and outran everything but time itself. And that's the magic of these 1960s power plants. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. Made in a time when engineers used slide rules and instinct, not software. So if you've ever leaned over a fender, wiped oil off your hands, and smiled at the sound of an old motor coming back to life, this list was for you. Got a story about one of these legends? Or maybe you've got a different pick you think we missed? Drop it in the comments. Let us know, and we just might explore it together in part 2. And if you're new around here, subscribe, join the garage, and keep the muscle memories alive. This ride's far from over.